What's up, you guys, and welcome to episode number 3 of the Down in the Dirt podcast, where we are getting dirty talking baseball. I am your host, Carson Lee, and I thank you for joining me today for another episode of the show. Today's show is going to be a little bit different, though. Like I said in the introductory episode, the very first episode of the show, not only do I want to be informative and bring guests on and allow them to share their stories, but I also want to have a little bit of fun and do talk things that are going on in the MLB or whatnot. And that's kind of what today's show is going to be. With it being opening day today, if you're listening on drop day Thursday or even later on after the season's already started, I wanted to give my season predictions heading into the 2019 season. So that's what today's episode is going to be. Next week we will be back with a guest episode. I actually have a good one lined up for you guys. It's going to be my good bud, Justin Cortez's, my teammate all this past year. And I was just down with him out in Florida. So that's going to be next week's show. But today, like I said, season prediction. But before we get started, I want to thank you guys for listening. Pretty exciting news is that now the podcast got approved for Apple Podcasts. So if you have an iPhone and you click on your podcast app and search for the podcast name, Down in the Dirt Podcast, the podcast will be there. You can subscribe to it. Make sure you get all the notifications. I'm pretty sure that Apple Podcasts might be the biggest listening platform there is. So, if that's the truth, that just gives us, or gives the podcast, a bigger audience to reach. And it's one more platform that we're on. So that means we're now on Apple, YouTube, SoundCloud, and Stitcher Radio. So whichever one you are listening on, make sure you are subscribed on that platform so that you will get the notifications whenever a show comes out and you can listen to it. And then also make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, because if you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, then you'll definitely see when I post the show on there, and you can go find it on Apple or SoundCloud, wherever you want to listen to it. You don't have to necessarily listen on YouTube. But YouTube, you'll get a notification through YouTube if you're not getting a notification from anywhere else. Also, I ask that you subscribe to my post notifications on Instagram. If you're watching the live video, I will show you how to do that. But I have a few people tell me that on Instagram the other night, I did an IG live, and they told me that they didn't see any of my posts about the podcast. They didn't see any of my stories about the podcast, so they weren't able to get to the links. They didn't even know any episodes were up. So I don't know why that's happening. It's something to do with the way the algorithms work. But if you go to Instagram, and since it's my home profile, it might not work. But if you go to the home page, so there it is, and you click the top 3 little lines on the top right corner on my home page, and you'll have a full list of options. And in those options, if you click turn post notifications on, you will be notified whenever I post something. And doing that will allow you to get notifications whenever I post, something new going on with the podcast. Once again, just another way for you to be informed that a new episode is out for you to listen to, and you can hear it right away. Like I said, I know some people were saying they were having trouble with that, saying they didn't get the notifications, that they weren't able to find the link or anything like that. So if you could do all those things for me, subscribe on whatever listening platform you like to listen to, and then turn on my post notifications on Instagram. I truly appreciate that. The only other thing I will ask you to do is to rate and review the show. Whatever you listen on, whatever system they have, if you could rate, review, and drop me a comment. Give me feedback too, how you think I'm doing, or just something you want me to talk about on the show. But the only reason I ask you to do this is because the way the algorithms work on these social media platforms, the more that the podcast is getting engaged with, the more engagement it gets through comments and reviews and stuff like that, the more that that platform will push the podcast out to people that aren't subscribed to it. So it'll put it on the discover page or the trending page, so that new people will be able to find the podcast and that they can listen to it themselves. This podcast is only going to go as far as you guys allow it to go. I'm just putting the content out. Y'all are the listeners. So y'all are going to make this podcast what it is, and that's why I appreciate you guys supporting it. But that's also why I ask that you re-rate and review the show for me, not only to let me know how I'm doing, but it will help the show grow as it brings engagement to the feed or whatever you call it, the page, and then it allows the algorithms to push it out there to more people so that they can find the show and that they can listen for themselves. So that's the last thing I ask you to do. I know I've said that in the first 3 shows, and I'll say it every show, but it's just crucial in helping the podcast grow. And so I appreciate you guys for doing that for me. But now, with that said and done, let's get started into the season predictions. 2019 season, opening day, all the way to the World Series. What's going to happen? Are you ready, guys? See, I asked that question, and in my head, I imagine, like the old WWE when Stone Cold would ask the crowd something. They, give me a hell yeah. They all scream back, hell yeah. I'm imagining you guys, are you ready? Hell yeah. But, so I hope you're sitting there on the couch or in the car and you're screaming hell yeah because you're ready. Because I'm ready. But here are my predictions for the 2019 season. The Boston Red Sox will repeat as World Series champions. All right, so that's going to do it for the show. I thank you guys for listening. Tune in next week, and we will have the interview with Justin Cortez. And I thank you for getting down and dirty today on the podcast. Till next time, guys. I'm just joking, guys. I'm going to give a real preview. I just had to do that. But let's go ahead and get started for real. I'm going to start with the AL because, frankly, to me, I think the AL is pretty boring. I really think that there's only 4 or 5 teams that are truly contenders this year. I think the NL is going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a slugfest between 3 or 4 teams in each division. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the AL. We're going to start with the AL Central. Obviously you have the Royals and the Tigers who are in rebuilding phase. So there's not going to be nothing really going on there. The only prediction I really have for that is I think Miggy is going to have a Miggy year. And he's going to be back to doing what he was doing 3 or 4 years ago. He looked freaking awesome in spring training. He looked healthy. And I think Miggy's going to be back to being one of the best hitters in baseball and have a big year, be back in the MVP conversation. But that's about all that's going to be happening in Detroit. Nothing really happening in Kansas City as they're back to rebuilding. But with the White Sox, I think, this is going to be the year. We saw them go hard after Machado. Ultimately, they didn't want to pay the $300 million price tag. But I think they have such a young core with their pitching and with a few of the guys they have in the infield. They have Moncada, and then now they got Elroy Jimenez on their opening day roster. They have Rodon in the starting rotation. So I think this is going to be the year when you see them start grooming their minor league system up in the majors and really grooming that core of guys for the next few years. So I think it's going to be an interesting and entertaining year for them. But they're not going to be at the top of the division coming the end of the year. But who will be at the top of the division coming into the year will be the Minnesota Twins. Yes, the Minnesota Twins are going to win the AL Central over the Cleveland Indians. I think with their signings they added this past offseason with Nelson Cruz, CJ Cron, Shoop, is that how you say his name? Shoop, the guy from the Orioles. He was with the Brewers. Marwin Gonzalez, and you have Byron Buxton rounding into form, showing some power. They have Jose Barrios at the top of that rotation, and Jake Odorizzi, the lefty. I really think that the Indians took a step back this year, losing Donaldson, although he was only there for a short period of time. But Lindor's hurt to start the beginning of the year, and Kipnis is hurt, and they traded away their catcher Jan Gomes. So although they still have one of the best rotations with Kluber, Bauer, Carrasco, I just think that they took a step back, not really doing anything this offseason, and the Twins got better. We saw them in the wild card game 2 years ago. So I think the Twins end up winning the Central this year. Indians ultimately, I think, are going to miss the playoffs completely. Now let's move on to the AL West. This is another division where I think it really only has two teams at the top really fighting for the top two spots. The Mariners and Rangers, don't think they're gonna get it done. The Rangers obviously are not going to. They are in full rebuild mode, so they're gonna be pushing a lot of their young guys up, grooming them for the big leagues. Like I said, same thing with the Royals. The Mariners, I think they're kind of trying to figure out what they're doing post Robinson Cano. I think they're going to be a seller come trade deadline. Edwin Encarnacion is going to be gone. D. Gordon might be gone. King Felix kind of at the tail end of his career, so he'll be, trying to figure out what they're going to do with him. Either he's going to be a starter, might be in the bullpen. Who knows? But the three teams you really have to look for in this division is the Angels for one. What are the Angels going to do? They just re-signed Mike Trout to the $430 million extension, which he fully deserves. I think if he would have gone to free agency, he probably would have got $500 million. I really do think that. Mike Trout's already the best player to ever live, and he's only going to build on what he's already done. He's already on pace, or not on pace, but at this point in his career, he already has more home runs than Barry Bonds hit. I think I saw a post the other day. He has like 235, and Bonds had like 170 at this point in his career. So Trout's putting up historic numbers. He's deserves every bit of that contract, but now he's putting pressure on the Angels to see what they're going to do, how they're going to respond. They still have the Pujols contract for a few more years, but what are they going to do now to build a winner around Trout now that he is committed to staying there, and they don't have to listen to trade, the trade rumors or trade questions or any free agency stuff coming up down the road. Trout's there for good. Now, how are they going to build around him and bring a championship to LA? And I think that's a kind of interesting thing to watch for with them. I think their pitching rotation's fairly weak. Not weak, but they just don't have any guys that just jump out to you. Big household names. So I think that's going to be an interesting case to look for out in LA. Moving on to the Oakland Athletics. I think this is the sleeper team. As always, every year it seems like they're the sleeper team. Nobody talks about them. Nobody expects much from them. But I really think this is the sleeper team in the whole AL to begin with. They're like, every year, like I said, nothing's really expected of them. And then they all of a sudden end up making a playoff push, or they find a way to get into the playoffs. But the A's this year, I think they're really going to push the Astros for the top of the division and possibly a wild card. They're another team that's brought up a lot of young core pieces, and now they're finally coming into their own. Matt Chapman being one of them. So we're really excited to see what he's going to do this year. One of the best defensive third baseman in baseball. Right behind Arenado. So really excited to see him take that next step and what he's going to do. And then ultimately, I think the Astros, though, are going to be the team that end up winning the division. Even though they're losing Dallas, possibly losing Keuchel. Lance McCullers was done for the year with Tommy John. Charlie Morton sides with the Rays. So the pitching is kind of taken a step back. You still have Verlander and Cole at the top of the rotation. Verlander, one of the best pitchers in baseball for the last 15 years. And he's only getting better with age. But even though their pitching's taking a step back, they did sign Michael Brantley, which puts another bat in the outfield with Springer and Reddick. I think that's a pretty big signing. And, obviously that infield's ridiculous with Altuve, Correa, and Bregman, and Gurriel, which one of those guys is going to be my MVP pick. Stay tuned to the end of the podcast to see who it is. But I do think the Astros are the team that obviously come out and win the division again this year, probably 95 to 100 wins. One of the best teams in baseball, and probably going to make a deep playoff push. Now, let's move to the AL East. This is probably the part of the podcast you guys don't want to listen to because you probably think I'm just going to be a fanboy and pick my team just because. But that's not the case. I'll give you my reasoning when we get to that point. But starting off, Orioles and Blue Jays, once again, not going to be teams you have to worry about in the division. Both of them rebuilding. Orioles, I don't even think they have really any superstar names on their roster. I think with the Blue Jays, what's going to be exciting for them is once Vlad Jr. gets called up and seeing how he lives up to everything he's done in the minors because he's been an absolute animal. So, that's going to be their notable storyline for the season. Once again, I think come deadline for them, they're going to be sellers, and Stroman's probably going to be finding a new home. They still have Sanchez, so they might ship him out before they ship out Stroman. So I think they'll be another interesting team to watch just to see what they do, but especially when Vlad gets up, kind of seeing how they handle that situation, how early he gets up, and then just the kind of number he puts up, because I think he might be either the Rookie of the Year, but he'll at least be in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. I don't really know what rookies are going to be coming up this year, but let's talk about the top two teams in the division, the best two teams in the AL, the Red Sox and Yankees. Obviously, I think this is going to be one of the funnest division races to watch, especially come the end of the year, August, September, even the trade deadline time, to see what happens come trade deadline. In my opinion, these are the best two teams in baseball. So it's kind of a shame they aren't in the American and National League, so we can see them in the World Series. But I think this will end up being probably the ALCS matchup. The Yankees, obviously all the acquisitions they had this offseason, getting Tulowitzki, getting DJ LeMahieu, two guys that solidify the infield, especially, with Didi being out with Tommy John surgery. I don't know how much of the year he's missing, but I do know he's missing part of the year. And then getting James Paxton to put in that rotation with Tanaka and Severino and Sabathia and J.A. Happ. Like that's a pretty big. He's a pretty big horse, and really I think him being in Seattle led to him not getting enough love as being a frontline starter. But in my opinion, I think he's a one or a two. He's got some good stuff, so I think that's a big piece for them, especially with Severino now being out to start the year for like a month. I think that's the only thing that's going to hold the Yankees back this year is the injuries they're going to have here at the start of the season. So it's, how fast of a start can they get off to at the beginning of the season and not letting those injuries cause them to lose games, just because they don't have enough depth or whatever, various scenarios. But then you also have the historic bullpen, and you add Ottavino into that, it's going to be pretty filthy with Tommy Kahnle. Is that how you say his name? Yankee fans? I don't know. Chad Green, Dylan Betances, Chapman, and then they have Zach Britton. So you have three guys who are, all-star potential closers on any other team. You have a ball in one bullpen, and then you throw in Ottavino. That bullpen is the best bullpen in baseball, and that's scary to go up against, especially come playoff time, because come playoff time, pitching is what's going to lead to championships. And then bold prediction here, but I think Aaron Judge hit 60 home runs this year. I don't know if you guys saw him in spring training, but he hit like 330 in spring training and had 6 bombs. He completely revamped his swing. So, he's looking like he's really starting to figure himself out. I know he had a big year a couple years ago, but, he's just going to build off of that. I know last year he struggled a lot with injuries, but I think this is a year where he really breaks out. And even though he already did break out, but, just really has a huge year. And I think, he eclipses 60 home runs. So I think the Yankees are going to be an interesting team to watch this year. I think they're going to push again, 95, 100 wins. Once again, they're going to be one of the best teams in the AL. But let's move on to my team, transition to my team, the Boston Red Sox. The defending World Series champions, winning 108 games last year. I know a lot of people want to talk about them not re-signing Kimbrel, not re-signing Kelly, and they're getting no love. They're acting as if they're losing the top four guys on the team, which I don't understand because they're essentially bringing back the same team that won 108 games. They're getting their whole staff back, they're getting their whole lineup back, and they're getting their whole bullpen back minus 2 guys. And a team like the Red Sox, with the money they have, come trade deadline time or even throughout the season, they're going to find somebody to put back into that bullpen to replace Kimbrel's spot if they don't have it already. And I'm thinking like Matty Batpacks, Matt Barnes. I think he might be able to solidify a spot as the closer, or Ryan Brazier, who had a breakout year last year. In the Red Sox bullpen threw well in the postseason. I think both of those guys could potentially be closers. So I don't get it when these people are saying that the Red Sox are going to be worse because they're not signing Craig Kimbrel. That's one guy that gets 50 appearances a year, 60 appearances a year, and they're saying he's going to be the cause for not winning 90-plus games again, 80-plus games again. So I don't really get that. And then when you think about it, they're bringing back their whole team, but they're also getting Dustin Pedroia back this year. He's going to be back on ring day in Boston. And the way I see it is he's not going to make you any worse because you're either going to get production from second base, which you didn't really have last year. So you're either going to get production from second base and one more guy in the lineup, or you're essentially just going to go back to what you had last year and platooning with Nunez and Brock Holt at second base. So I don't really see how that could hurt either because you're only going to get an addition into the lineup. And, I mean, the way Pedroia is, the dude's a friggin' animal. He's intense. He's going to expect a lot of himself. I mean, 2 years ago, the year he had the knee injury before he went and got surgery, he hit 300. I think he was at like 296. So I mean, he still is playing at an all-star level. He just doesn't get the freaking love, which drives me nuts. Because the dude is still one of the best second basemen, if not the best second baseman in baseball. He's a Gold Glove candidate every year, and he's still a offensive catalyst in the lineup. He's a locker room presence. He's a leader, and he's the heart and soul of that team. So I really I don't get that. I think the Red Sox again are going to be a 95, 100+ win team, and I think they ultimately do make it back to the World Series. I really do believe that, and that's not me being a homer or a fanboy. That is my actual prediction of what I think from that team. And they're bringing back the same team last year that had a historic season, winning 108 games. And they're going to get a full year of Nathan Eovaldi. I think David Price getting the monkey off his back and really finding his changeup and finding himself in the postseason, that's going to lead to a huge year. I think Price ends up with 18 wins during the season. Jackie Bradley hitting with JD in the offseason. There's a lot to love about this team, and I don't think they're getting the love they deserve to have a chance to go back to back. But that's just my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. But I don't want to forget about the other team in the AL that does scare me, and that's the Tampa Bay Rays. Out of nowhere last year, they win 95 games, and it's like they would have been in the playoffs had the Yankees or the Red Sox not won 100 games. Them winning 100 games is what kept them out of the playoffs. But I mean, they won 95 games, which is freaking incredible. So just seeing what they do this year, I'm kind of excited for that. And they have a three-headed monster at the top of their rotation, having Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, and then signing Charlie Morton. So kind of seeing how that plays itself out. Blake Snell winning the Cy Young last year, seeing how he takes that next step. In their lineup, it's really weird because they don't have any just guys that jump out at you. I mean, Kevin Kiermaier, now has been there for 4 or 5 years, so he's really the mainstay guy. But other than that, they don't have like that it guy. So I'm interested to see the next step that they take. Them being a small market team and how they can aim to replicate the year they had last year, because winning 95 games, especially in that division, that's going to be tough. So seeing if they can somehow make a wild card push, or even maybe a push for the division, I don't know. But yeah, so that's my preview prediction of the AL. Now let's move into the NL. What I said was going to be interesting. This is the powerhouse league conference, whatever you want to call it. National League, I think, is going to be a lot of fun this year, between all the teams they have fighting for top division spots. So let's go ahead and get started. With the National League East. I think this is going to be this is going to be the most entertaining division in baseball. All four of these teams made significant additions to their team this off season. Really chasing to be the top dog in the division. But obviously, when it's all said and done, come the end of September, heading into October, obviously the team that's going to be taking home the division crown for 2019 is the Miami Marlins. I'm just playing. It's definitely not going to be the Marlins. Probably the most irrelevant team in baseball this year. They're just going to be, once again, rebuilding, just bringing guys up, grooming them for the show, and really trying to build a culture for the future. But the teams that are going to matter this year, let's go ahead and start off with, might as well start with the Phillies. I mean, obviously they have the biggest signing of the offseason by getting Harper. Just the same thing that the Angels are going to have with Trout. I think the Phillies are going to have with Bryce. Really the pressure now that you have him for the length of his career. Now you got to bring a winner home to Philadelphia. Put the pieces around him to make sure that the team has the best chance to win, which I think the pieces they have from what they've homegrown, and also the additions they made with McCutchen, Segura, Romuto, the catcher. I think those are some pretty big additions from what they already had. And then, you have Rhys Hoskins in the lineup that Harper's going to hit either in front of or behind. So I think it's going to be a scary lineup, but the real question is going to be their pitching. Are they going to have enough starting pitching to get through the year to really, make a deep playoff push? I mean, I know they have Arrieta and they have Nola that are going to be the top two dogs. But, what's Nick Pivetta going to do coming off his season last year? Vince Velasquez has been up and down. He came over from the Astros in that Ken Giles trade. See how that works out. That's kind of funny. But I think the Phillies are going to be another team that make I think they might either go sign Keuchel, or they might, be a team that goes for the trade deadline come middle of the year and, goes looking for a big arm that they can throw into the middle of that rotation to complement the rest of those guys. And if they do that, I think they'll be pretty scary, especially in the East. But moving on, going to the Mets, the Mets are such a weird situation. I mean, you add Cano getting older at the end of his contract, but you get Edwin Diaz in it also, the best closer in baseball. What do you have, like 52 saves last year? Absolutely ridiculous. They add Jed Lowry to solidify the infield, already with Ahmad Rosario in there at shortstop, so they have them two up the middle. They put Pete Alonso up on the opening day roster for, I think he's playing first. He might be playing third. I'm not 100% sure. I know they have Dominic Smith, who's supposed to be a big prospect, but he hasn't really panned out. So Peter Alonso might be playing first base, but, they bring him up. You have Michael Conforto really as the centerpiece, the new face of the franchise, kind of taking the spot of David Wright, but then you also have DeGrom and Syndergaard, and you give DeGrom that extension, so really committing to, I guess, winning now. So seeing how that pans out, I think they're going to be kind of an interesting team to watch. I'm really kind of wondering, because there was so much talk this offseason about them selling off Syndergaard. So if they struggle out the gate, or really just don't get back to a playoff level record wise, come trade deadline, come June, July, are they going to look to move guys like Syndergaard, um, or Lowry, and get pieces back? Like what kind of situation are they really in? So I think they're going to be an interesting team to watch. But then the Braves, obviously adding Donaldson, I think that's going to be a huge piece to that lineup. I know he dealt with injury all last year, but I think that he still has good years ahead of him. I mean, his MVP years only 2 or 3 years behind him. I don't think it's asking a lot for him to even come close to replicate that. If he could even give half of that, that's still that adds a lot to that lineup when he's hitting around Freeman. You have Ozzy Albies in there. You have Acuna, who I think is going to take a huge step forward and possibly be in the MVP conversation. So you have those 4 guys hitting around the top of the order in that lineup, and I really think the Braves are going to be one of the teams at the top of the division most of the year. So we'll see how they respond come year 2, especially after getting the taste of the playoffs last year for all those young guys. So I'm interested to see what the Braves do, but they might fall short. Once again, like I said, this is the most interesting, exciting division in baseball this year. So I really don't know where I'm leaning at on this, because all 4 teams, especially this next team that I'm about to get to, I feel like they have a good chance to win the division or either get a wild card spot and make a push come October. So it's kind of hard to lean one way. But moving on to the Nationals, this is one of our social media questions, Killian.Milhet. I hope I said that right. But he was wanting me to touch on the Nationals. So this is my segment on the Nationals. For them, yeah, they lost Bryce, but what did they really lose? Juan Soto came in last year and had an absolutely ridiculous season once he got called up, being in the Rookie of the Year conversation. So they're talking about him being the guy that really steps in and fills Bryce's shoes, and gives either equal or more production. So, really, did you lose anything if he can replicate what Bryce gave you? In the outfield, you have Adam Eaton out there who's still coming off that injury from 2 years ago, so really seeing him get back to the level he was playing at in Chicago. And then all throughout the infield, I mean, the infield's pretty dirty. You have Brian Dozier getting signed to play second base. Can he do what he did in Minnesota when he hit 41 home runs, 51 home runs, something like that? Ryan Zimmerman, still one of the best guys, one of the best offensive guys in baseball, even though he's getting up there in age. But you have Trey Turner at short, and then Anthony Rendon at third. So, their offense is still going to be one of the best offenses in the National League, especially 1 through 6. I'd say, how many guys did I just mention? 2, 4, 1 through 6. Like, that's still a pretty deep lineup. And then their pitching rotation is absolutely stupid. Anytime you have Max Scherzer on your team, best pitcher in baseball, Cy Young candidate every year, and then you back that up with Strasburg, and then you sign Patrick Corbin. Their pitching is stupid. And then you have Trevor Rosenthal and Sean Doolittle in the bullpen. It's hard for me to go against the Nationals, even though every year they get picked to win the division, and then they kind of figure out a way to screw it up, especially last year. And I know they've won the division a few times, and they end up making the playoffs, and they lost in the NLDS. But I really think the Nationals this year, not having Bryce kind of taking the attention away from everybody or being the center of attention and having to deal with his free agency like they did last year, I think this is a year they really, 90 wins, 95 wins, and, make a deep push into the National League playoffs. But like I said, this division I think is going to be one of the most exciting ones in the MLB. So I'm really looking forward to see what happens with them. But moving on to the Central, this is another one. You have 4 teams that I think could potentially be division winners. So it's, especially the top two, the Brewers and Cubs. It's kind of hard for me to lean one way. Uh, but getting started, touching base in the Reds, it's kind of interesting what they did this offseason, getting Puig and Kemp, in that trade from the Dodgers. And they're starting really to call up a lot of their young guys and grooming them. They still have Votto there. They have Scooter Gennett there. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what direction if they go, if they kind of, do like the Phillies did last year or the Braves, where, they're anticipating maybe being there a year early and really trying to make a playoff push, or if they're still grooming guys. So I think they're going to be an interesting team to watch. The Pirates, this is another social media question. My boy, Midnight Moose, wanted me to touch on them. The Pirates are interesting, because last year they said they were rebuilding, post McCutchen. They're rebuilding, but yet come trade deadline they go and get Archer, which I understand because he's under team control and has one of the best contracts. So why not get him and keep him there? And so he could be the top of your staff, especially as you're bringing young guys up. But then they claimed Corey Dickerson off waivers last year. You still have Starling Marte and Gregory Polanco in the outfield. So 3 guys in the outfield. And they have one more guy, I'm drawing a blank. You have Jameson Taillon in the rotation. So you have 2 top of the line guys in the rotation, pretty deep lineup, and so it's kind of hard to lean either way. Are they trying to rebuild? Are they going to make a push for it? I know last year it seemed like they were kind of making a push after they started off, having a good year. There's some predictions out there saying they're going to win 90 games. So I guess we'll see how they play out. I really don't know how I feel about them. I feel like they're a team just like the Rays in the AL. They had a good year last year, so it's kind of seeing now how they build off that and direction that the franchise wants to go. But then the Cardinals, essentially the Spurs, San Antonio Spurs of baseball. Every year they figure out a way to win. Every year it seems like they're in the playoffs. One of the best organizations in baseball. And now getting Paul Goldschmidt, the most underrated player in baseball in my opinion. And getting him on that extension. So just seeing how that plays out, the kind of impact he has on that lineup. Once again, like I said, the Cardinals always find a way to win. So regardless if it's the wild card or the division, I'm kind of interested to see what kind of season they have. Having Jordan Hicks back into that bullpen, obviously that's going to be exciting to see him throw 100, 105, 110, 115 miles an hour. But then, the top 2 dogs, I think, aren't going to get topped, though. Brewers and Cubs. I think, really, the Brewers are bringing back the MVP. They got Moustakas back. They have Aguilar at first base. And, Braun and Lorenzo Cain out in the outfield. And I really think the only thing for them is they're missing just one more guy in that rotation. And I think possibly Keuchel might slide in with them and be, one of the rotation pieces for them, or there'll be another team that goes deadline trade hunting and goes to find a guy come trade deadline time. But between them and the Cubs, I really think it's going to be a crapshoot between who wins the division. I think these are the 2 best teams in the National League, so it's kind of hard. I think the one that wins the division obviously is going to go on playing the NLDS. And I think the one that doesn't win the division is going to host the wild card game, have the best record out of the 2 wild card teams, and then they'll go on to the NLDS also. I think, like I said, these are the 2 best teams in the National League. So I think they'll be slugging it out. Possibly that this could be a NLCS matchup. I definitely think the Brewers are going to be my World Series pick in the National League. I think the Brewers now going in year 2, Yelich really coming into his potential, his form. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch this year. And I think it's very possible there's a Brewers-Red Sox World Series. If I had to, I was a betting man, which some people would say I am, I would bet that it's Brewers-Red Sox 2019 World Series. But moving on to the West, the Giants, they're going to end up being sellers, I think, come trade deadline. Bumgarner, Posey, Longoria, I think they're all gone. Getting rid of dead weight, getting rid of contracts. Diamondbacks, what are you doing? You get rid of Goldschmidt after you just make the playoffs last year. Was it last year they made the playoffs? It might have been 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. Um, you have that Greinke contract. You still have pieces there. I don't really get what they were doing, but I don't think they're going to be in play. The Padres signing Manny Machado, having the top farm system in baseball, having Fernando Tatis to start opening day. So really they're going to start bringing up their farm system and grooming them for the major leagues. So seeing how long that takes for them to develop, how ready they are, and the kind of impact that Machado and Hosmer have on that team. I think, this is kind of the team of the future, especially being in San Diego. They might entice some guys later on in the future to come play there. So I think they're going to be an interesting team to watch just to see how quickly those guys can come together and be major league ready. And then obviously the top two dogs are going to be the Dodgers and Rockies. I think with the Rockies, them re-signing Arenado this year and then getting Blackman, I think that was last year, right? So having those two guys, they're two core guys committed for the next 5 years together. They are in that same position like the Angels and the Phillies, that their window is now to win. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do, especially on the pitching side, because I know a few years ago they committed a lot of money into the bullpen, getting guys like Wade Davis, and they had John Gray, Kyle Freeland up in that rotation, really coming in, making their debuts and coming into their own in the big leagues. So seeing how they take that next step now that they're in year 3, year 4. Kyle Freeland was one of the best pitchers in the National League last year. So seeing how that pitching holds up, especially playing in Coors Field, I think the Rockies are going to be one of the top dudes in the National League, potentially a 90, 95 win team. But they have to go against the Dodgers, who now have been to the World Series the last 2 years. Obviously, they have the money to get whoever they need come trade deadline, free agency. Falling out of the Harper sweepstakes and not signing him and getting rid of Puig at the same time. Kind of interested to see what kind of step sets them back. And then obviously Kershaw having the injury problems, Belo being down. So they've made it to the World Series the past 2 years, but they're still a threat in the National League. But I think this is the year that the Rockies potentially win the division, potentially are an NLCS team. I think the Rockies are the most underrated team in baseball and don't get enough love, especially when you have Arenado, in the middle of that lineup and playing third base. I think Arenado's one of the best players in baseball, right there behind Trout, right there behind Harper, right there behind Mookie. And really he should be winning an MVP, in the near future. So that's my preview for the season. Now come playoff time, these are my playoff picks for each league for the AL and the NL. I'm not going to go too deep with ALDS, NLCS, and World Series. Like I said, I think World Series is probably going to be Red Sox, Brewers. Kind of just going on a limb on that. But other than that, it's going to be very brief. My playoff picks for each league are, starting with the AL, Red Sox, Yankees, Astros, Twins, A's. Not in any particular order, but I do think Yankees and A's are going to be your wild card, with Red Sox, Astros, Twins being each division winner. Now going to the NL, I think you have the Braves, Phillies, Brewers, Rockies, and Dodgers, with the Phillies and Dodgers being your wild card game, Braves, Brewers, and Rockies being your division winners. Now let's move on to the awards. This actually comes from my guys over at the Yard Work. They wanted to know my MVP picks. I think in the AL, this is the year, we saw it last year, really took it to a next level, but I think this year he takes it to an even further level, and Alex Bregman is going to be my MVP in the AL. Obviously Trout's always there as one of the top guys in the league, being at 1-2 for every year of his career. But I think really Bregman's going to put it together this year and have a monster year. He's the face of the Astros. He's the best player on that team. And I think he's going to have an MVP year and he's going to carry that team, not only with his play, but his attitude as well. And then in the National League, I think Bryce going to Philly is really going to allow him to replicate the MVP year he had a few years ago. I think having that short porch in right field, he's going to have a 40 home run season, and he's going to be probably right around 300. And so I think he's going to have another MVP year, and he's really going to, embrace being in Philly, embrace being the face of that franchise, and helping groom those new guys, and living up to that contract. Now moving on to my Cy Young picks. In the AL, I think it's a toss-up. I think it's either going to be Sale or Verlander. I mean, last year it would have been Sale had he not missed, the month or two that he missed and not qualified innings-wise. But he was having a Cy Young year, and every year he seems to have that same kind of year. So, I mean, if he even replicates even close to that, 200, 250 strikeouts, pushes 300 again, I think he could potentially be the Cy Young. But I also think 1B in the Cy Young conversation is Justin Verlander. Like I said, having the analytics in Houston, he's just been getting better and better as his career has gone on. Even at the age he's at, around 36, I think. I think having Kate Upton as your wife probably keeps you nice and spry, keeps you young and athletic. But I think he has a monster year. I think he pushes, leading the league in strikeouts. He's going to be at the top of that category. So I really think it's 1A and 1B for Sale and Verlander as far as who could be the AL Cy Young. Moving over to the NL, this is easy. I think it's Max Scherzer, best pitcher in baseball. Every year he has a Cy Young year. I think this is just another year for him. He wins another Cy Young award. I think this will be his 4th if he wins it. Not sure on that. Don't quote me on that, but it might be 4. Moving on to Rookie of the Year. This was actually asked by Spencer Pitts what my Rookie of the Year prediction was going to be. Really the only one I can predict is Vlad Jr. in the American League. Other than that, I don't really know too much about rookies. So I don't have nothing to predict for the Rookie of the Year award. That's about it. I just have the MVP and the Cy Young, and that's all. So that's my season preview. Those are my predictions for the 2019 season. Like I said, if you're listening today on drop day, Thursday, opening day, it's the best time of the year. It's the best holiday of the year. I love opening day. So I wish everyone a happy opening day. I wish the best of luck to your team this year. I thank you for tuning in with me again. Be sure to leave me a comment. Let me know who your predictions are for this season going forward. But that is it for this episode of the Down in the Dirt podcast. Like I said, tune in next week for my interview with my teammate, my good friend, Justin Cortezis. Till next time, guys, thank you for getting down and dirty with me on the Down in the Dirt podcast.